Ahoy! With Danzaburou almost being released at this point, I figured it's a good time to talk about his mechanics. In this video, which I recorded when PTS was still live, we'll look at various mechanics of his abilities, as well as combos and some item interactions. In order to not make it too long, this video will not include the bounce spots on the Conquest map. That will be a separate video once Danzaburou is released. With that out of the way, let's begin. Let's first have a little bit of a look at Danzaburou's 1. So what you can see here is you have these 3 separate projectiles, and obviously you can bounce them on to the enemy from other angles as well. So if I, for example, if you look at the center one, if I shoot from here, I can hit it like this as well, and it will have the same effect. But what's more important is the close range impact of this ability. So if you get really close to an enemy, you can actually hit them with all 3 projectiles, like this. And technically also all 3 detonations, though that is very unlikely to happen because the enemy is likely to walk out of the area where those 3 ops are, unless you lock them down in another way. That is where technically the 2 comes in. So the ideal combo for Danzaburou, if you are able to get that close and everything, would be to drop his 2, so that you can taunt an enemy, and when they're taunted, then you hit them with this, so they basically have no chance to get out before the detonation pops off. But that's super risky at the same time because you have to be in the enemy's face to do that, and also it's not that easy to confirm both the 2 and the 1 to get that distance going and time that right. It's a little bit of a feeling of getting the timing here. So it would be here, so he's intoxicating, taunted, and then he would get pulled in. Another thing to keep in mind when it comes to Fool's Gold is that you can bounce it on a minion wave. Obviously you don't have these type of lanes in the Conquest map, otherwise it'd be perfect because you can hit all 3 projectiles at once. But in the Conquest map there are certain angles at which you can try and hit a secondary projectile by not aiming straight at the enemies. So if you aim straight at the enemies, it would be kind of like this, but instead you would be looking to do something like this. It looks different on the Conquest map, but you get the idea. You wouldn't get this initial bounce here. The rightmost bounce would probably go somewhere else. But you could shoot the left projectile against the wave, and the secondary, the middle projectile, could bounce into the back arches. And you could do that from the other angle here as well. The problem is, if you do that, it's relatively likely, unless you get the perfect angle down, that you will give up multiple shots on the center minions. And I think there is more value in just going straight for the center minions and just shooting right at the biggest clump of them because they are more tanky than the archers anyways. So I think there's more value in having the full wave stacked up as normal here. And then you would just shoot right into these guys so that they get hit by all 3 projectiles. So like this. And that will clear them out immediately. Obviously I'm a bit high level here, but that would usually result in very easy clear. You can try to combine that and just have a weird angle here basically, where you try to both hit these because you're really close and then bounce back over here, but I don't know if this is actually feasible in the Conquest map, especially when there's also an enemy team that's trying to stop you from positioning perfectly. What you can also do with the 1 in lane is trying to use the secondary projectiles to hit an additional guard. So you might want to wait out until one of the enemies is at this angle or this angle, and you just shoot straight at that point and hit an additional guard, maybe the support, with one of the projectiles and get bonus gold that way. So you essentially use your enemies to farm more. The risk with that is that you need to walk to the goal to pick it up. So you will have to either have your support do that for you, or you have to be in a relatively strong position in lane. Now when it comes to Danzaburou's 2, Alluring Spirits, you can actually re-aim the ability in the period while Danzaburou drinks it. This happens even if you're at full HP. So what you'll see is I'm aiming at this, I'm going to drink, and then I'm going to flick over to the other Odin and it actually change the placement of the projectile. So I'm drinking, and then I turn it over here, which means you can re-aim this on the run quite easily. You can just decide if someone's chasing you, say we have this Odin chasing us, and you're aiming under yourself, and then you flick it back a little bit because that's going to hit him that way. That'll work out for you. And you can see here that the taunt duration, or the taunt effect, comes in very quickly. The 3 ticks onto the enemy are very, very quick, so often it will be enough to deter them from fighting you because they're going to be fighting that bottle. Also keep in mind with the 2 that you don't actually have to hit an enemy for the taunt. So if I put this bottle down here, and the Odin ends up walking into it later, he'll still get taunted by that bottle. Depending on how long or how much later it is, the duration may not be long anymore, but it's still a disruption at that point. Keep in mind, this is without diminishing returns. This ability is completely immune to diminishing returns. So you will be able to apply this in many situations and to zone off areas in a team fight as well, especially escape routes too. Between the 1 and 2, both basically set up each other. You can use the 2 in order to set up a taunt, and with that taunt you can then set up the 1, so it will look like this. But you have to be pretty quick with this because the taunt duration is not that long. Or alternatively, you can use the 1 in order to intoxicate the enemy and therefore make it a little bit easier to set up the slow. That doesn't work well against these bots, obviously, but it does work relatively okay in a normal Conquest game. You can use them independently. They don't necessarily need to combo into each other, and sometimes you want to save the 2 for area denial, or you want to have the 1 as a finish off ability. So it's not something that is an inherent given, but it's possible. His third ability is the perfect boxing tool. You put it down, you're slow immune, your movement speed is increased, and you also have no movement penalty, you have that haste. If you can use this to box, great, it's gonna give you a massive advantage. I didn't use it all too much that way so far because I was playing on high ping, so it's gonna be hard for me to really reliably box with basic attacks anyways. But in actual game scenarios, I think this will be very, very strong and likely also see nerfs. You have the option to leave the field and turn into a leaf. And that's pretty cool. What you notice here is I put this field down and it has a 5-second duration, I think. So you can wait quite a bit. And then once you leave the field, you will turn into the leaf, but it's independent of when you leave it. So I leave it now, it's relatively late. And the leaf duration here is still 4 seconds. On the other hand, if I drop it and I leave it immediately, the leaf duration is also 4 seconds. So if you want to use this perfectly, then in most situations you want to use this within the field. You want to stay here for a while and then make your way out close to the end so you get the movement speed boost and you get the additional, well, semi-stealth effect along with it. So unless you're looking to just straight up run away, you can use the extra movement speed that you have in the field and the slow for the enemies first to juke them and then have the additional benefit afterwards. Something that took me a little bit of getting used to because normally the urge is to just run out and get as far away as possible, but that's not necessarily the best call in all situations. Can demonstrate that here with the slow as well. You see the Odin is slowed, I'm sped up, and then I get out here. When using the 3, keep in mind that you might want to use it a little bit erratic, because otherwise it will be very easy to identify you as the leaf that is running away. You will see the one that's furthest away, speeding up, you know, that's the one. Whereas if you just circle around a bit, it might be much harder to find out which the actual leaf is. This is because this effect with you being highlighted is only visible to you and your teammates, not to the enemies. You can also cancel the 3, so if you use a basic attack while you're in the leaf form, it'll interrupt the ability immediately and you can go back to fighting. So you can also use it as a brief speed boost to chase down an enemy and then just go back into the fight from there. What you notice from all of these abilities is that he gets massive benefits from fighting close to an enemy. He basically can drop his entire kit here, can slow here, then taunt a little bit here, get more slows, more CCs, intoxicate the enemies, and deal massive damage while being sped up and while doing taking decreased damage from the enemy, and then can even still get away at the leaf. So you can do a massive amount of quick bursts and get out afterwards if you want to. When you are going from the leaf form into fight, you can also use an ability and kind of take a little bit of the telegraph part away by just using the ability right away. See that you kind of just turn into Danzaburou as he fires the ability, and it can help a little bit. It's not a massive deal, but I think just taking away a little bit of a visual cue for these abilities can be strong. When it comes to Danzaburou's ultimate, Uproarious Rocket, there are 2 ways in which you can use it. Either you can just fire it or you can travel with it. If you fire it, you'll have this targeter that marks the enemy for the ultimate. So we're gonna fire it here and we're gonna see who's marked. And we see that you can switch the targets while you're firing and it will hit whoever you target last while you let go of the projectile. This is, in my opinion, how the ultimate should be used most of the time, because it just keeps you a lot safer. On the other hand, you can also decide to ride with the rocket, which gives you this different visual style, and then you can travel around. If you don't hit anything, what you can see here is it'll still explode and it will still deal damage to enemies. This is especially nice if you are going a little bit more bruiser and if you're really looking to maximize this kit by fully going in. So you could essentially go in with the ultimate on a target and then choose to go straight into the 3, drop your 2 to taunt them and fight them with a 1, and you deal a massive amount of damage to them very, very quickly. Even better again if you get close to them and shoot them with the 3 projectiles of the 1. So that is most certainly a playstyle that is also possible here. The rocket can be used as an escape, but there's one problem with that, and that is it's incredibly easy to body block it. So if an enemy was in front of me and I tried to ult away, I cannot do that, even if I aim to the side. There are lower tolerances for this in-game from what I felt. I think with ping this gets even harder. So while here, if I just stood this far away, I could still fly away. I think in-game when a guard is running towards you, that's going to be even harder and you're just going to run into them most of the time. So yeah, it doesn't seem like it's an option in most scenarios as an escape because the wind-up is just too long. Unless you already created some distance with a 3 and you just want to make sure that you get far, far away. In that case, yeah, it can work like that. So you may already know that the ultimate is blocked by walls. But what's interesting is that it will still detonate on the wall. So if I aim at Odin here and I fire the ultimate, it'll not actually hit him because he's not going to get stunned, but he'll still get hit by the secondary explosion. This means he will still take a fair amount of damage to that. So sometimes it can be worth ulting someone even if you know they're gonna get just around the corner. Just to make sure that you've seen that here. For comparison, this was the 390 damage, so definitely did not hit Odin. And here we have the 781. While flying around with your ultimate, you can't do anything else and you cannot even cancel it. So you have to go into a target. You have to hit something for it to stop. Obviously, if you change your mind, you can just turn around and fly backwards or fly into a wall to quickly get out of that form, but you're stuck in it for as long as the ultimate hasn't hit anything yet. That said, the rocket can do relatively quick 180s if you really want to. I think a fundamental part of learning his late game will come down to learning to steer the rocket very well, because that way you can use it in the jungle much better than his normal projectile, which will give the ability much more effectiveness in late game in jungle fighting scenarios. As for item interactions, Danzaburou interacts with basically everything as expected. You get your Heartseeker and your Crusher effects, and you also get those on the 2, even though you could technically look at this as a deployable, and of course you get that on the rocket as well. Something else that I wanted to try were the interactions with Runeforged Hammer. Unfortunately, he doesn't have anything cool in that regard, so I took 2 items that have the same power as Runeforged. The damage remains the same, because all the CC on his abilities is applied after the damage is already confirmed. At the same time, I wouldn't inherently say that Runeforged is a bad item on him, because he has so many ways to apply CC. Every one of his abilities has some CC, so you're always going to amplify some of your basic attacks, or something at least. Maybe especially with the 2, if you get the taunt on the enemy, and then with the 1 with an Intoxicate, you can get a lot of amplified basic attacks. So I think that counts for something, especially since bruiser items generally work for him as well. That said, I would say there are currently a lot of bruiser items that are better than Runeforged Hammer, so I wouldn't necessarily include it in a build for him. And that's it for Danzaburou's mechanics. Nothing too crazy here, but a lot of stuff that can be used in interesting ways. If you are new to the channel and you want to see more updates for Danzaburou, especially a guide as well as the bouncing spots on the Conquest map, feel free to click the sub button and maybe the bell so you get notified when those videos come out after it's released. And other than that, I hope to see you for the next one soon. Duke Sloth, out.